Hello, my name is Garvin, and I read things and natter about them on the internet for your entertainment. Today, we're continuing our look at Lemuria in popular culture, and that has led us into science fiction. So, the week before last week, I introduced us all to the German science fiction series Perry Rhodan, and last week we looked at the science fiction series reboot Perry Rhodan Neo. But now it's time to get to the whole reason we were talking about Perry Rhodan in the first place. The Perry Rhodan Lemuria miniseries. So let's turn to, shall we? The Perry Rhodan Lemuria series is a miniseries set in the larger classical Perry Rhodan universe, and it takes place over 3,000 years after the events of the first novel's Enterprise Stardust. The miniseries itself was published in Germany starting in October of 2004 and was released throughout 2005. It's 6 novels total. The first novel, The Star Arc, which is the novel we're going to cover today, was translated to English in 2005, but the remaining 5 books weren't translated until 2015. Which is what I've kind of come to expect from efforts to bring Perry Rhodan to English audiences. It's unfortunate, really, because I do think there's a lot of people who would enjoy these stories, and there just seems to be a lot of obstacles for people who only read English to be able to get access to them. The series was written as a self-contained story within the larger universe, so I'm just going to dive in and see how much I can pick up of what's going on. Before I get into that, though, I have sources with 2 different authors for this miniseries, so I'm going to mention both of them, and hopefully any Perry Rhodan fans who see this can let me know if that's correct or not. The first author I found listed was a German science fiction writer and banker, Hubert Hensel, and I apologize for my pronunciation. That was the best pronunciation guide I could find. He was born August 9th, 1952. He had started writing in 1979 and is credited with 39 novels in the Perry Rhodan spin-off series, Atlan. I'm not going to go too much into the Atlan miniseries because while I did find some sources, I couldn't find any of the novels in English, and we do have a limit on time and space. In the main series, he's written 11 Perry Rhodan paperback novels and a variety of other works in the genres of horror, crime, fantasy, and adventure, and he's been a regular writer for Perry Rhodan since 1995. The second gentleman is the one who's listed in the majority of my sources, and he's of course listed on the copy of the book I got from Amazon. That is Frank Borsch, who was born in Germany on April 9th, 1966, and started reading Perry Rhodan at age 11. He has worked as a journalist, a freelance publisher, editor, writer, and translator. In fact, in the 1990s, he worked for Marvel Comics, translating Hulk and Punisher comic books into German. His first work as an author was also part of the Atlan series, and his work was published in 1998 with a standalone sequel that was published in 2001. He has also written non-Perry Rhodan books that are, I believe, science fiction from what I can find, but since I don't have too much information, I'm not going to get too deep into that rabbit hole. He has also, in addition to working on the Lemuria miniseries, was the head editor for Perry Rhodan Neo, which we discussed last week, and he handed over control of Perry Rhodan Neo after issue 100. So, just like I did for Enterprise Stardust, I'm going to do a written review where I focus on the first novel specifically, and my plan is to do a written review for the first and 6th book of this miniseries, in addition to doing a video. There will be a video in the coming weeks for each novel, though. In this video, I'm going to address the question of, can you come into this series cold, with very little knowledge of the Perry Rhodan series, like me, and still follow along with the story? Because, as I mentioned in my first Perry Rhodan video about 2 weeks ago, there's a lot of story, and most of it simply isn't available to English audiences. Yes, I know it's a character flaw that I can only read and write English, but it's one we're going to have to live with, at least for now. And I think it is a shame because this is just my personal take. Sharing fiction between cultures and learning about what other nations are reading or even watching is a good way to build appreciation. And it's always interesting to see the differences in different societies' written works, whether it's fantasy, science fiction, horror, crime, whatever. But it's also interesting to see the similarities. So I find this, again, unfortunate. I keep ringing on this, but it is what it is. So I'm just going to have to work with what I have. So let me start by what I picked up of the general universe just from reading this novel. Perry Rhodan is still alive. In fact, he's immortal now and is a fairly legendary figure among humanity. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's earned being a legend. I mean, just in the story I read, he's the first guy to make contact with aliens, and then he turns around and keeps us from blowing ourselves up in a panic. So, yeah, he's earned a couple fame points, we could say, right? Now, humanity itself is a great power in the galaxy, but might be in a mild decline. I say might, because the only viewpoint that says that in the story is from a character who's part of an alien race that is mildly antagonistic to humanity, although, admittedly, I think I'm using the wrong term when I say humanity. You see, the novel makes it very clear that the aliens, the Oconians, are in fact a type of human, and a number of the races out there that we would consider aliens are actually humans. So when discussing Earthfolk like myself, and presumably 100% of my audience, I apologize for presuming, but that's what I got, the series calls them Terrans because, all things considered, humanity is a very broad term in Perry Rhodan, it seems. I was also able to pick up through just this novel why all these aliens are considered humans. Because they are humans. Basically, on Earth over 50,000 years ago, an advanced civilization arose on the lost continent of Lemuria and spread out across the galaxy until they ran into another alien race that objected to Lemurians being alive. And they decided to address that objection through just a little bit of genocide. Now, the Lemurians managed to put an end to their enemies in a very unique way, but the Empire did not survive this fight. It collapsed. However, because the Lemurians were able to confront their enemies and turn them from bloodthirsty genocidal maniacs to thoughtful philosophers who were really shocked and appalled at what they had done, scattered survivors managed to keep going. Most of them survived in various colonies across the galaxy or in further flung places, and people even survived on Earth. So while on Earth humanity was pushed back to the Stone Age to begin the long crawl upwards again, out in space there were colony worlds that were just a bit more fortunate. And among these survivors are the Aconians, who see themselves as the rightful heirs to the Lemurian heritage and resent us Terrans sharing in that. It doesn't help that they see us as Johnnies come lately to the galactic scene, and the fact that we forgot Lemuria even existed while they based their whole identity on being descended from Lemuria. That probably doesn't help either, if I'm going to be honest. However, while they're not fond of us and just a bit antagonistic, they're not outright hostile, and they certainly aren't shooting at us, at least not on sight. So, Perry Rhodan thinks that a peace can be made here, and looking to ease tensions and help build channels for that peace, he heads out to the boondocks of space to try and make informal contact with the Aconians. He's sort of trying to set up a back channel for communication, so there's ways to hammer out misunderstandings that can arise from formal communications. And this could be important because, as in Perry Rhodan, such as also in life, formal communications from governments can and often are written more for the satisfaction of domestic audiences rather than clearly communicating a position to foreign powers, and that can be a problem in diplomacy. So now we know why Perry Rhodan is bumming a ride on a prospector ship looking for minerals and metals to mine in space. and why he's there when they find something important. And so does an Aconian science ship, for that matter. They both trip over a vast and important artifact from Lemuria, a functioning generation ship traveling at relativistic speed, which means this ship isn't using faster than light technology. It is even dependent on spinning to generate gravity for the people inside. And just as a side note, I was delighted with the attention to detail and the fact that the story addressed the implications of that technology. For example, the strength of gravity is varied inside the generation ship. The closer you are to the center of the ship, the weaker the gravity is. But the closer you are to the rim of the ship, which is spinning, the stronger the gravity. Time dilation is a factor in the plot that characters have to consider. Just to go over this real quick, time dilation is the idea that observable time passes at different speeds for people who are approaching light speed. Like, if you are near light speed, time appears to pass slower for you than people on Earth. You might have heard of this. This is the whole, a guy gets on a ship, heads out at light speed, he experiences 10 years, but when he comes back on Earth, 100 years have passed. It's that. So when the two ships match speed with the generation ship, time is passing differently for them than everyone outside. And there's even a difference between how the people on the ships are experiencing time compared to inside the generation ship and the people who go into the generation ship. That has been done in science fiction before, but it's not done incredibly often. Sometimes it can be a little tricky to keep track of these things. So I was glad to see it here. So on the whole, I think I was able to keep track of the story, and I feel like I more or less understand the plot and the motivations of the characters in that plot. Although I have to admit, the fact that I have some basic knowledge of the Perry Rhodan universe might have been a big part of that. I'm not sure if I was coming in completely cold, like this is the first Perry Rhodan novel I picked up without any prior information, if I would have been able to figure it out. But, to be honest, I've read all of 2 Perry Rhodan novels. And one was a Perry Rhodan neo-novel, so I'm not sure that applies in this situation. And I've read maybe a handful of online sources to get some additional information about Perry Rhodan, not this story specifically. And even then, I'm able to figure it out. To boil down the main conflict of this story, we have something that is a culturally and scientifically important discovery to 2 cultures. And these 2 cultures do not have the best relationship with each other, and that makes this whole thing complicated. And it gets more interesting when you throw in what's going on with the people who are still living inside this ship and have been in there for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, cut off from all outside contact and living in terror of being found by their dangerous alien enemies. But I'm going to dive more into that in the written review, and I hope you join me for that. On that note, I think this is a good place to end this week's video. I hope you found this video informative, or at least entertaining. If you did, please leave a like, a comment, or consider subscribing. All of these help me in my eternal struggle against the dread Lord Algorithm. Terror be on his name. If you'd like a voice on the subject of future videos, consider joining my Everwise patrons for $1 a month. There's a link in the description below. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to give a special thanks to Big Steve, my biggest patron supporter, and I'd also like to publicly congratulate him today, because he has had a story published in the recently released Shrapnel issue 21, which is the official Battletech magazine. So if you've hung around this long, please drop a congratulations to Big Steve in the comments, and if you have $7 to spare and an interest in the Battletech setting, go ahead and pick up the magazine. I'll link to it in the description below. Next week, we are going to take a look at Perry Rhodan Lemuria Novel 2, Sleeper of the Ages. I hope you join me, but until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and of course, keep reading.